Good afternoon and welcome to the 7th Annual Radio TV Film Pro Perspectives panel at UW Oshkosh. I'm your host, Reegan Wallander. Thank you for joining us live on 90.3 WRST FM Oshkosh and Titan TV channel 97-57. During today's program, we'll be joined by 3 successful radio TV film alumni to discuss a variety of topics ranging from their time at UW Oshkosh to their success finding a job in the media industry. For those of you listening or watching at home, please feel free to join in on the conversation via Twitter and send us your questions for the panel by using the hashtag RTFPro. Now, without further ado, let's introduce this year's panel. Our first panelist is the Communications Coordinator at Girl Scouts of the Northwestern Great Lakes. As a proud Girl Scout alumna, she uses her media and writing skills to communicate council news, events, and stories reflective of the Girl Scouting mission. She works closely with traditional media to share amazing things the Girl Scouts are doing within the community and oversees the council online presence. In case you are wondering, her favorite Girl Scout cookie is the shortbread. Please welcome Melissa Loest. Our next panelist is a 1977 graduate of the RTF program and is an award-winning advertising social media professional for the Fortune 500 company American Family Insurance, headquartered in Madison, Wisconsin. Please give a warm welcome to Keith Caters.
Thank you. Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, we have a UW Oshkosh graduate from the class of 2010. Since graduating, she has worked in radio as both an announcer and news reporter. She is currently a news anchor and producer at News Radio 620 WTMJ in Milwaukee. Everyone, please welcome Sarah Lind. To provide a little more background for our audience, let's start by talking a little bit about your jobs. Could you each give us a brief overview of the responsibilities of your current position? Let's start with Melissa.
Sure. My job has a lot of components. I do all of our social networking for the council, so that is every different aspect of that, from Facebook to Twitter to LinkedIn to all of that and more. We're getting involved in Instagram and Vine and a bunch of different other sites because we want to attract Generation Z, the next generation coming up, because we and you millennials are soon not going to matter anymore. That's how it works. I also do a lot of writing, so I write for our council publications. We have monthly, quarterly, yearly newsletters that I write. We have all kinds of different writing things. We recruit girls, all of our signage, posters, all of that. And then along with that, I work with traditional media to promote Girl Scouting. So I go on local news, local radio, work with a lot of different newspapers to promote Girl Scouting, whether that be the annual cookie program, Girl Scouting recruitment, anything like that, major events. I work with media to share our mission and news.
Awesome. Next, Keith.
My day, it sounds like yours, being in social media, it's never the same, and which makes it exciting. One of the things I like about that, our company has a lot of different campaigns going within our advertising area, and social media is often a component of that to help amplify the campaign, the message, and also to get engagement with our followers. We have hundreds of thousands of followers, and we use multiple channels like you do, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. YouTube's really what got me started into social media with my video background, which I started here with that foundation. So, I still today often check YouTube and see what's going on with that, and in some cases publishing.
All right, Sarah.
Okay, mine's a little bit different, obviously. I do a lot of things at the station, at the radio station. We're an AM station. We're the largest one in the state. And so part of my job, as the producer role of my job, is I work, and when I work, I'm actually by myself most of the time, but I run the station completely. So there's nobody else there. I'm there in charge when we have network programming, which in a lot of stations now runs itself, but I'm there to make sure that the commercials run smoothly and everything goes on time and when it's supposed to. And the other part of my job is to be a reporter. So I do newscasts every hour. I'm kind of an anchor during the overnights, and then when I work on weekends too. I do news every hour, sometimes every half hour, doing an update for the station live. And then the rest of my job, I spend writing news and doing interviews with people, mostly over the phone. I'm based mostly at the station. There are some people that go out, but I stay there.
Awesome. Well, now that we got that all established, let's take it back to your time at UWO. When did you all know you wanted to be an RTF major? We'll start again with Melissa, because you're right here.
I came to UW-Oshkosh for the program. So I applied, went for university, I applied lots of schools, but the three I was looking at were Oshkosh, UW-Oshkosh, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and Columbia College of Chicago. And I chose Oshkosh because of the radio television program. Like when you took a tour, there were the studios to look at, the radio station and all of that, and I just knew that that's the kind of production I wanted to go into. Especially because when I looked at Columbia, they said that you wouldn't touch a camera or go on the radio or do anything until really like the first semester of your junior year. So I knew instantly that's what I was coming here to do.
Okay. Keith?
Now for me, I started out as an art major, and I don't know if there's still a ceramics department here, but that's something that I was really into. I started in high school. So with the art major, I was doing ceramics, I was doing drawing, photography, which is an interest of mine that I continue with today. And it's just a building over. And a friend of mine that I met at Scott Hall in the dorms here happened to be in this building, and we met on our way out one day, and he said, "Do you want to check out radio, TV, and film?" And it's Harry King, great producer, director, living in the Chicago area. And we did a tour, and once I got into the studio, I had no idea what the lights were. You know, it doesn't look like a kill to me. What's going on here? And then I went down to master control, which, again, had no idea. All I saw was blinking lights. And then I ran into Dr. Schneider, and he had some time that just asked, if I wanted to sit down and talk about the program. And after that, I actually changed majors to radio, TV, and film. So I was really starting from scratch, learning everything.
When did you make the switch? What year?
It was about a year and a half in, roughly.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sarah?
A little bit of a similar story. I actually started off at a completely different school in a completely different program. I was a music major for quite a few years, and then it didn't work out at my other school, so I switched to Oshkosh. I was a music major here for a little while, and I just decided one day I wasn't happy, it wasn't going well, and my professor over there could kind of tell. He knew, and I was in the background. I always thought, okay, communications would maybe be something that I would go into eventually. And after talking to that professor, that day he called over to the RTF department and said, "I'll call and get you set up with a meeting with somebody." Talked to that person, and 2 days later I was an RTF late major.
That was quick.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so now let's talk about the student orgs and what you guys were all involved in. I want to start with Keith, because your art, were you involved with anything with art, and then how did that transition over to RTF?
Well, I think having the art background and also the photography that was part of the program at that time, it all helped me, to look at things, I think, from a creative perspective. The technical side was definitely, needed to learn a lot about that. As far as, the transition, I just, dove in and got involved with, there was some groups, I think it was Epsilon Rho at the time, things like that, Alpha Epsilon Rho. So I got involved with that chapter. We actually went to a national conference in Washington, D.C. back then. So just getting involved as much as I could, just dive in, and then also looking at the professional student organizations like that helped a lot too. It just brought more exposure to, to what everybody was doing. And, it's a learning environment here. So, even though it can be intimidating not to know exactly what this device does or what the director does, or, everybody's got these different functions as you slide into running a camera or running an audio board. That's a little scary, doing some things that you've never done before, but it's just a matter of I'm going to try it, and if it doesn't work, try it again, and just try to get better at it.
Sarah, what student orgs were you involved in?
I was involved with Film Society, and then obviously Titan TV and WRST were a huge part of my education.
How did any skills from those orgs, how did those help you transition into radio?
With the radio one especially, I did news here for WRST, and a lot of that helped me to learn how to write news and do newscasts. And we did them live then too, so that was a good experience. And then just learning how to run the board and make sure that the audio levels were great. That's really helped me in my professional career as well.
Melissa, what orgs were you part of?
I was a part of WRST. I think I had from my second semester of my freshman year until the end, I had a radio show, I think from 11 p.m. till 1 a.m. Straight through, once a week. And then I was involved in Titan TV quite heavily. I was worked on some shows, probably my favorite being Titan Forest. And I think Sam Mark was here a couple years back or last year. And then I was Titan TV station manager for a year. And then my senior year helped with the budget. And then outside of RTF, I was very involved in campus government. So I lived in the residence halls all 5 years I was here. So I was a big part of USRH, and then moved on to both regional and national organizations dealing with residence life.
So how did those skills that you developed at those students orgs, how did those help you transition into the career you are now?
Personally, I think it helped me to learn to work in a team environment and to be able to take the lead. I think a lot of students, there's taking the lead in a collaboration, and that's a skill that you don't learn in a lot of different places, where you can take the lead while collaborating with others, and you don't have to step on anybody's toes, and you can accept that everybody in the group has skills that they can offer, and they're just as valuable as the leadership presented. And that was a really important lesson for me in my professional life, because I use that all the time.
Yes. All right, so looking back, you all had great backgrounds and involvement in student orgs. Is there anything that you wish you could have maybe gone back and done more of or got involved in? We'll start with Sarah. Looks like you might have an answer.
Maybe, probably a little more with the radio station. I mean, I did some, but I definitely, looking back, I would have done a lot more air shifts then, just to get a lot more experience, just getting comfortable in front of the mic. That definitely takes time to get used to.
Melissa?
I would say for me, it would be the writing side of things. Writing skills are skills you will use forever in any job you have, in any field you go in. And having a command of language, for me, both in making and producing videos for Girl Scouts and writing stuff. I mean, you have no idea writing skills. I mean, even down to sending emails to other staff members to explain what you need from them. I mean, I probably, if I could have gone back, I would have gotten involved in a writing group and really worked on cultivating those skills, even more.
Now, Keith, what about you? What do you wish you would have maybe got more involved in?
Well, actually, writing is a great point. I didn't do a lot of writing while I was here, but I am today. And I've written a lot of scripts for longer form videos, but now since being in social media, I write short posts, even down to 140 for Twitter. But I would agree too, writing is something that you can use within media, but also your communications to team members, and trying to sell your idea or your concept. These days, at least where I work, you don't get a chance to meet every day, so there's a lot of emailing that's going on. Just email, and then you've got to be short and to the point. So I actually got a chance to work at WRST too. The late shift, you said you?
Yeah.
I did too, and that was a good experience. And again, in my previous job at American Family as a producer, we have really pretty decent studio facilities and audio recording capabilities. So originally we did everything ourselves. We videotaped, we recorded audio, we edited, and as our team got bigger, some of those positions became more specialized. but at least you knew everything, or a pretty good idea of what goes into, getting the audio track and mixing things together. And I am curious, how about music? Did in terms of music, bringing that, going back to some of that experience?
Sure. Yeah, with my music background, it kind of helps. I was able to do research and stuff. While I was at WRST, actually, I did a jazz show, which was interesting as part of a class, and I was able to use my music background for that and know all the composers and all the artists. That kind of tied in a little bit with that.
Now, speaking of the classroom, let's move into the classroom. Was there a specific professor or a class that really helped impact your RTF career? We'll start with Melissa.
A class that really impacted my RTF career. For me, I think I took a documentary course with Troy Perkins, and that was really probably the class that brought it all together for me, because it wasn't a class at the time when I took it. You didn't make a documentary. You actually just did all the pre-production for a documentary, and it actually helped me to figure out that for me, what is important to me is causes. I did, my project was about postpartum depression in women, and I realized how important women-serving organizations were to me, and it was this moment where I realized, I could probably use my art and my technical skills to do things that I believe in. And so that was really the moment where it kind of all came together for me, personally.
What about you, Keith?
There's a couple different classes, but I had a news, audio, radio class, whatever it was called at the time too, which helped me, I believe, when I started out in broadcast news at Channel 2 in Green Bay. But I used to go around campus with a recorder and record some events or interview people, and you'd have to come back and write something, even though I didn't do a lot of writing back then, but that I think helped me tell a story in a short period of time. So I don't know if that's still being done here, but that's a good experience. And then one of the things that the past director, Al Folker, one of the first things when I started, he asked me to help him on a project, and I just said sure. I wasn't sure, I had no idea what it was about, but we ended up going on this giant cargo airplane somewhere west of here, and he gave me a camera, and I think he did all the settings at that time, but just this is fun.
Yeah.
Radio, TV, and film. I'm on a plane with a camera, and we're going to do something with this film, and it was filmed back then. We also had some video capabilities here at the time, but we transferred it over. But I just found it really fun, and there's just so many things that occurred which made it interesting. We used to have speakers that would come to speak at UW Oshkosh, and we would, certain speakers would ask to come back to the studio and do Q&As like this, and it's just interesting to find out more about people, and what a way to spend a day.
Exactly.
Doing things like that.
Exactly. Now, Sarah, what about you? Did you have a favorite class or professor?
Sure. Yeah, there's a couple that stand out in my radio classes. I believe one of them was a radio storytelling one, and the other one was like a radio announcing class. Both of them were with Randall Davidson, our current professor here. And they were just really wonderful classes to be able to, again, teach you the storytelling aspect of radio, especially the one was a storytelling one. That one really helped me learn how to do the multi-track recording, so put different pieces of audio together and do interviews and make them so that they make sense. You can form a story that will fit within the timelines and make sense to your listeners. And then the announcing one, I know we did a little bit of news writing in that one, and that definitely helped me. And he brought in a few reporters that he knew from out in the field, and that was just a great learning experience for us.
Did you have a favorite project that came out of that class?
There were a couple of audio pieces. I think one of them was still being played to some of the classes here and there. There was a personal essay that I had written that used some audio in there.
Okay.
I don't recall offhand what it was, but
I'm sure Randall probably knows
yeah.
that. Melissa, what about you? You mentioned your documentary. Was that like your favorite project that you did, or is there another one that stands out?
I think the documentary project was one of my favorite things I worked on. I have to admit, one of my favorite projects I worked on was I took cinematography, which I will tell you now, I came into UWH just thinking I was going to be a cinematographer, and then took courses and I was like, I'm never going to be a cinematographer. But I took cinematography anyway, I don't know why. But I took it, and another student and I were working on our final project, which was a night scene. And if you've taken cinematography, you know that that means some blue light. And so we shot it, and her and I both, we got it together, and her and I were like, I don't know, like the entire time. And I remember thinking, no, I did it right. I read the book. I did this right. And we finally looked at the finished product, and it was good for what I could produce. And that was that moment where you think to yourself, well, this is not my skill. And it was a really good learning moment that I remember very vividly and viscerally. Just like standing right in this room and putting the lights up and going, I don't know. And it was really when I realized that my role in media was probably in a leadership capacity, not in a hands-on camera capacity. And it was really good. So never discount those moments when you're just like, yeah, this is not it. Because those are learning moments too, and they get a lot out of them.
Internships can also be really, really good learning moments. Did any of you have internships? We'll start with Sarah. Did you have an internship?
Yep. I did my senior year that summer before I did my final year of college. I worked for a radio station here in town, and that was absolutely amazing because it was a smaller station, and they had me do news, but my supervisor, he would just basically hand me the microphone and say, here's this, go cover this. So I did a lot of really interesting interviews that summer. I spent a week out at EAA and just got to interview whoever I wanted to, just go around and find people and talk to them and then bring back the audio and do that. And then he also let me sit in on some sales meetings and some promotional events too, just so I could kind of learn about other aspects of the station.
Mm-hmm. And now that was a smaller station, you said? Now WTMJ is huge.
Yeah.
How did that transition, how did that help you at all?
Just learning the basics of going out in the field and doing interviews with people, even over the phone too, and learning how to do newscasts as well. I did some shorter newscasts for them, and that really helped me develop those skills.
Interesting. Keith, did you have an internship?
I did not, but I can say that our company really supports internship program, and every year we have quite a few interns within marketing and in other divisions too. And I'll tell you, it's just really refreshing to have people come in that are still in college or nearing getting out or just after, to just jump in and have their perspective, and you can kind of get focused, I think, too much if you don't have a different point of view and a fresh point of view, a new point of view. And there's actually a lot of interns that have, in fact, most of them are just, to me, amazing, and that's an opportunity for them to also make an impression, and some are actually hired, and others use that experience to go on to somewhere else.
Melissa, did you have an internship?
Yeah, I was an intern with an organization in Chicago called Big Shoulders Media Productions, and they worked with HGTV shows like Design on a Dime and Design to Sell, and I worked on set as we shot those with their very small crew. It's a camera person, a producer, and someone with a microphone, and that's it. And we went into people's homes and watched the on-air talent redo the homes. And then that led to being an intern production assistant on a pretty major motion picture that was happening in Chicago that summer. And I feel like I'm just telling the stories about when I was like, yep, this is not for me, but we're going to tell the story anyway.
You always learn from your mistakes. That's how that works.
True.
I wouldn't call them a mistake. I would call them like it was like, oh, this is not for me. So when you're shooting, you turn off the air conditioning in all these houses for sound and all of this stuff. So I kid you not, it's like 100 degrees, urban heat index, and I'm like scraping paint off a wall and carrying cords around so they're not in the shot. And I was just, I honestly thought to myself, I hate being on set. I hate this. Like, I don't even just dislike it, I hate it. It's the worst. And I know that other sets are not like that, but it was that aha moment, like working on the documentary project and like doing the lighting, where I was just like, there has to be something else in media that I can do, that I will like to do, that I will love to do. And the internship and the major motion picture, where it was 100 degrees and it was awful and there was just lots of people, and I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't fun for me. And it was that moment where I realized, like, oh, this summer, the entire summer, the summer of 2006 was just hot and sweaty and not fun and expensive. And but it was the moments where I learned, like, there are other roles in media that we can play. And I love media, I love watching media and being a part of media, but there are other ways you can make media, and there are other ways you can be involved in media. And for me, putting all of those pieces together, I had that internship, and then I took that documentary class, and I took that cinematography class, and all of those pieces kind of came together for me to make me feel like I could still do this, but I can do it the way I want to do it. And that has made all the difference personally. So that internship was great and terrible at the same time.
There you go. Do the Girl Scouts, do they have interns?
We do. Most of our interns are not in media. They're in our communications team. They're in kind of what I always refer to as boots on the ground. They are working with girls. We get a lot of grants to serve underserved populations. And so we have programs that bring Girl Scouts to where girls are, to communities and schools where they wouldn't necessarily get a chance. And so our interns typically work with those girls to have them participate and get the leadership and financial literacy and confidence that Girl Scouting provides.
And Keith, you said American Family Insurance has interns?
Yes, yep.
Does WTMJ?
Yes, they do. We have several each semester, and then in the summer months. So if anybody's in the Milwaukee area, the summer one would be a good one to do. There are some that actually work directly in our newsroom. They work with the news staff, and they can actually record interviews, and even sometimes end up on the air too. Or your work will be. The stuff you recorded would end up on the air, maybe not written by you, but by somebody else, but the audio you gathered. And then the other part, you can also do sports internships and work with our sports team. We also have the promotions aspect where you can go out and do the promotional events. So some of our interns get to go out to Brewers games and Summerfest and State Fair, so all the fun stuff in radio.
Now, what advice would you have for people who are applying for internships? We'll start with Sarah.
I would say just make sure they know your experience, and if you know somebody that works at the station, that's always helpful too. It's always helpful to have those connections.
Keith, do you have any advice for people going into internships?
Well, I think each organization probably has their own process, and I know we do too. So I would say check into it and learn as much as you can about, how do you become an intern at any organization. But that starts through just inquiring and maybe targeting some businesses and asking questions, contacting HR there, express your interest in, being an intern. And most companies will be really happy just to share, what the process is.
I will give some practical advice. Overdress for your first week until you find the lay of the land. Work really hard. People notice when you don't. Make sure you show up on time and take it very seriously. A lot of internships, as we all know, mine included, are not paid. Act as if you're being paid. People will notice. The people on staff will notice. We hire a lot of people who are interns. We just hired someone who was an intern, like their first day was Wednesday. So like that is an entry in, especially in a place like if you want to go into news like TMJ, like act as if that is your job and your job is on the line to be there.
All right, now talking about jobs, how did you all get the job that you got? So we'll start with, what was your first media industry job, Melissa?
For me, I got into sales, and sales is an interesting place. And sales, if you are good at it, is amazing. If you are okay at it, it's pretty good. And if you're bad at it, it is awful. And so for me, sales is how I got in and how I realized that I wanted to actually still make stuff, but not in the capacity of like high-level production.
Keith, what was your first
I
job?
actually have a similar situation with sales.
Yeah.
And after graduation, I moved back to my hometown in Green Bay, thinking I could maybe get a job at one of the TV stations. And if I would have had an internship, I probably would have had a better foot in the door, but I didn't. But I got a meeting with all the news directors there and gave them my pitch. And in the back of their desk, they had tons of demo reels and resumes, and they were pretty frank with me, which was good. They said, we have a lot of demo reels and resumes on my desk, so they just said, keep in contact. So I was able to get a job at a company in Green Bay selling audiovisual and photography equipment, things like that, and I just kept in contact with the stations, and eventually a former UW student that I worked with mentioned my name at Channel 2 News, and that was another connection through this program where I got a chance to get interviewed again and was hired as a photographer, and then I also did some editing. But that was my lead in, and I left sales, which there's sales is okay. There's a place for sales,
Yes.
And in fact, I would recommend everybody talk about other classes that earlier, things that you might want to consider. But I think, marketing, marketing yourself or marketing the company you end up with, just knowing more about marketing. And which sales is a branch of marketing in a way, or separated in some companies. But the writing, the marketing, and even a financial class probably would be helpful, especially if you start your own company as a freelancer, or if you're a freelancer, you got to keep track of expenses and all that stuff. So there's some other, besides for our trade core. Things that we've learned here, there's some lifetime skills outside of that which can come in handy.
Sarah, what was your first job?
My first job, I worked in a very, very small market, obviously. It was in Whitewater, out in kind of the country just outside of town. And it was a country station. I was not a fan of country music. And I took it anyway because I needed the job, and it was kind of it was a good starting place. I knew it was a good foot in the door in the radio industry. I did kind of the midday shift. It was voice tracking. I was on air. But they liked me because I had that news experience. So at a lot of radio stations, especially if you're first one, you end up, and smaller stations, you end up doing a lot of different roles. So it's helpful to know the news part and the announcing. So that really helped me get my foot in the door there.
Okay. Now, Keith, you mentioned that there was piles of resumes and reels on a desk. What suggestions do you have to the students to make your resume stand out?
Well, these days, I think it needs to be almost like an ad. You don't want to put too much stuff in there because everybody's, that's in hiring position, and everybody that works with them, time is short. It almost needs to be social media, not that short, but think of bullet points of things that you've accomplished, things that you're proud of, things that you want to do, things, your dream job, let them, things like that. But a page at the most. Even if you're in the industry a long time, your resume can get longer, but I even think with that, it needs to be tightened up quite a bit.
Any other suggestions, Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to add on to that. You can also target it to the specific job you're applying for. So go back, and if there's a job description, read that, see what they're looking for, and then highlight those skills that you have in your resume.
Anything to add, Melissa?
Early on, when you don't have a lot of work experience, you should really highlight your strengths. And so that may not be, like, it's maybe a bullet point of meets deadlines and a hard worker who is willing to get the job done, that sort of thing. Highlight those skills you have, because on paper it will make you stand out from the myriad of other people applying for beginning jobs in the field, where they just list that they worked on several campus productions or maybe at a local station. That'll make you look a little bit different. Oh, they have skills that they want to market over just the same things that everybody has been working on, sort of thing.
Now, networking is huge in our industry. Do you think that networking, let me reword this, how big of a role do you think networking plays in our media industry, Melissa?
Networking is big, I think, in any industry. Who you know matters. I will say for me personally, so I'm the communications coordinator for the Girl Scouts. And for me, knowing people who work at the local TV, radio, and newspapers is super helpful, because I can call someone I know and say, hey, you graduated in 2007. I graduated in 2009. I need to go on and talk about Girl Scout cookies. Can I come on and talk about Girl Scout cookies? And those human connections really, really matter at the end of the day. And I also think it helps if you're looking for new jobs, because let's be honest, very few people stay in the same job for 40 years anymore. And so if you're looking for new jobs, for a place to move up, knowing people always helps. Knowing someone at the company or the organization or the station is always that one step up compared to everyone else.
Keith, do you have anything to add to that? How does networking play into getting a job?
Well, today it's a little bit easier with LinkedIn and other social media networks, where you can connect with people that are, you can join groups, like LinkedIn has groups, which I think just became private this week, so which is they're trying to get the conversation going, have people discuss it more openly in a closed group, but you can connect with people that way. But I've also up until a few years ago, I was involved with the Media Communications Association, and Madison's got a really strong chapter there, and that's a great place to meet people in person too. So, I mean, you can do things socially, but the in-person connection is great too. You could see something that they posted, like it could have been a project, and you can ask them about what led you to this project, and ask them, show interest, and so in-person and social networking is very important.
Sarah, anything to add about networking?
Well, definitely agree with what they've both said about that with the social media aspect. And the radio industry definitely is very small. You'll find if you're in radio, everybody pretty much knows everybody. So it's always good, especially if you're going to a new place, because chances are there's somebody who knows you or somebody that you've worked with in the past. Another thing with the networking, in my job, it's also helpful when you're writing news stories and you're trying to find an expert. You might not know somebody that's in that story, but you might have a friend who knows somebody in the industry that you're trying to write a story about. I've used that for audio, or in the recording industry one time, for an example. I was trying to find somebody to interview, and I had a friend who worked with some recording artists, and they were able to set me up to do an interview for one of my stories.
Cool. Now that was an interesting story. I kind of like that. What other career obstacles have you had working in radio?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of any offhand now.
Keith or Melissa, do you have any career obstacles? While Sarah thinks.
Well, when getting into nonprofit, so obviously the Girl Scouts are a nonprofit organization, a lot of times you can't just apply for your dream job. You actually have to start. It's something that has no relation. So at the Girl Scouts, I started as administrative assistant, And then I moved to being a community development coordinator, which is you have a territory and you go out and you help girls join Girl Scouting, you help them get involved in the cookie program, you help them get and do all of their ceremonies and all the Girl Scout traditions. But really at the Girl Scouts and a lot of nonprofits that I know of, it's very much a culture of hiring from within. And so I came up through the ranks. I had helped out with lots of different communications things. I'd made videos for the Girl Scouts. I'd done a lot of, I always volunteered to go on the radio or television to talk about Girl Scouting. And so for me, I spent 3 years working for the Girl Scouts, not doing any media other than helping out. And that's really how I got my job, was just proving that I was a good worker, that I care about the mission, that I care about my coworkers. And that's really how a lot of nonprofits and, quite frankly, a lot of local companies work. You have to pay your dues, so to speak.
Keith, any obstacles you had?
I think I would say obstacles with challenges. I've been obviously in the industry for a long time, so things changed. The foundation you get here is great, but as you move on, technology changes. The practice, maybe not so much. The ability to produce a project, work with teams, things like that you had mentioned too. That doesn't change. That core, but I think technology has changed quite a bit. So the obstacle or challenge is, which shows interest too, is to stay on top of all the changes, all the technology. Other obstacles too are things that are out of your control, which you just have to sometimes roll with it, or just focus on your job, your project, and that's some of the challenges.
Yeah. All right, Sarah, you had some time to think now.
Yes. So definitely one of the kind of challenges with radio is a lot of times it's harder to find jobs in radio now because they've gotten so much smaller. My station right now is very much a rarity. We are one of the only live stations, 24 hours a day. We have somebody there doing live news. Most of the stations now have gone to voice tracking. So you'll come in maybe on a weekend and do a few hours, record your whole shift, and then you're done. But you're on air. You're on air for maybe 5 or 6 hours, but you really only do 2 or 3 hours of work. So it's a little challenging to try to get in there, but like Melissa was saying, once you get your foot in the door, you really need to start and get that experience. That's really going to help you over the long run. And I know a lot of times with radio jobs too, a lot of them, once they get in those positions, they're going to want to stay there.
Right.
So that's another obstacle that you kind of run into in this field.
All right, so now that we talked about the challenges, let's talk about the rewards. Has there been what is the most exciting or rewarding part of your job? Melissa?
For me personally, it's sharing the mission and movement of Girl Scouting. So recently I got to work on a large video production, which I don't get to do as often, but we got a large grant from the Green Bay Women's Fund, and we're serving, it's a large-scale program that's serving underserved girls in the Green Bay School District. And so these girls get hooked up with a mentor, they have programming, they get to go and do fun things that they wouldn't get to do on their own. Just a lot of cool stuff, and so we needed to report back to the Women's Fund, and our CEO asked us to create a video. And so I got to spend about 3 weeks making a video sharing the outcomes, and I got to interview the girls and interview the advocates. We did a full-on video, green screen, I got to edit. Basically I did it all, because in nonprofit that's what you do. So I wrote, I direct, I shot, I edited with our friends at the Green Bay Boys and Girls Club. And it was wonderful to get to talk to the girls and to hear how a program really changed their lives, but then to get to create that in media and to share their stories. Because at the end of the day with Girl Scouting, I'm not sharing my story. I'm not sharing my vision, I'm sharing girls' vision, the girls of northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I'm sharing their experiences and their stories, and it was so amazing to get to record this girl saying that, somebody cut her sister's hair and she, in the past, would have beat them up for it, but because she learned from her advocate that that wasn't appropriate, she doesn't do it anymore. And that is incredible. And it was so much fun for me to do that and to share that and to put it out, for all these women at the event, and then put it on YouTube and all of that stuff. It was amazing. And it's so much fun, and that is really what I love about my job.
Keith?
For me, my
anything?
profession is it's social media and video. It's different every day, which I like it. You know, I work on a lot of different projects in different phases, so that's great. Our company also is doing something that's important for people. You know, everybody has things that are important to them. Things are physical in nature too, like your home, your auto, things like that. Being an insurance company, you know, it's hard to think of it more than a piece of paper that you get in the mail and you tuck it away. But when you need our service, our insurance, it can change lives. And like what the Girl Scouts too is making an impact on people's lives, and I think we can too by providing insurance.
Sarah, any exciting aspects about your job?
Sure, I would say definitely the storytelling aspect is a big part of it. You get to talk to so many people that you never would have thought you never would have imagined, and just some of the stories that I've gotten to do were fun, just to be able to share different events and about people's lives. I know going back in the past, there's somewhere I've done, probably one of my favorite ones was I got to do a soldier's homecoming one time, and that was probably one of the best experiences ever. There was a mom there who hadn't seen her child in like a year, and her child was just a baby when she left, and when she came back, the daughter was a year old. And to do something like that and to be able to share that story was absolutely amazing.
That sounds very rewarding. All right, what advice do you all have for students who are nearing graduation and how to make the transition from going into a media student position into becoming, a media professional? Melissa, do you have any advice?
I would say, I mean, if you have your heart set on going out to LA or New York or even Chicago for that matter, you can really specialize, right? You can become an editor or a director or a writer or whatever. But if you're looking to stay here, you cannot be a one-trick pony. It's just, it's not in the cards. Because in the jobs around here, and there is nothing wrong with wanting to stay here. That is something I wish someone would have said to me when I was here, because so many of the students around me were like, I'm going to LA. And that's awesome, and I think LA is incredible, and I think New York is incredible, and Chicago, but that was never for me. That's not what I wanted. And there's nothing wrong with wanting to stay here, but you have to hone all the skills. And that includes the media skills, but it also includes the writing. It includes the interpersonal, the team aspect, being able to work on a team, being able to manage projects, being able to see the big picture of something. Because that's something I found in the workplace that not everybody possesses, is the ability to see a big picture, which you really learn in media, because you have to see the small stuff, but you also have to see, the forest through the trees. And so if you're looking to stay here, you need to have more than one skill.
How did you make that transition into becoming from a media student to a media professional?
For me, it was just jumping in. Like, just jumping in. I think when you're here, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can sometimes get an inflated sense of self. Right? Like, I had a radio show, or I ran my Titan TV show, or, I won an award, or whatever it is. And then when you become a media professional, you kind of have to go back to the beginning again and just jump in and be willing to be the low person on the totem pole and be willing to pay your dues. And so for me, that's really what it was just saying, all right, well, I'm in this and I'm going to do it.
All right, well, in a few moments, we're going to start taking questions from our studio audience. If you have any questions for our panel, there's a mic in the back. And if you are listening on WRST 90.3 or watching on Titan TV, feel free to use the hashtag RTFPro, and we'll get your questions to the panelists. All right, but first, let's talk about your areas of expertise one more time, just to make sure. Sarah, you are an announcer and news reporter, and becoming you're an anchor. So tell us how someone moves up in your industry.
So in mine, it's more about the experience. You have to start on the lower end, even if it's, part-time, or like I said, where I started working in a station that might not be exactly what you want to do. So I started off in announcing, but having that that news part on the side, and then I was able to develop more of my news skills and focus, and then move up into a news position. So you might be surprised, not starting off exactly where you want to be, but gather those radio skills as you go.
All right, and Melissa, over the course of your career, your job has shifted to more of an online outreach opposed to a traditional media. Which do you think is more important for students to focus on?
I think it depends on what you want to do. If you do want to go into traditional media, then you should learn the basics, the skills, the processes, because like what Keith said, the programs you're using are always changing. But learning how to edit or how to direct or how to do whatever it is you want to do is important, the how. Not the tools are secondary. But for me, if you are looking at working in a like corporate industry or nonprofit, online is where it's at, because for the most part, online is free. And when it's free, you have to be very good at it because everybody else is doing it too.
All right, and Keith, over the course of your career, you have been involved in a lot of different innovative areas. What do you recommend for keeping up with the latest technology?
For me, I just read a lot every day, and it's trade magazines, online trade magazines. It's meeting and discussing things with people within American Family. The social media team that I work with is just amazing. The media center team, which I came from, is amazing. And actually, you're talking about skill sets. We do have editors that are just fabulous, and they really have focused on that. And then there's others that are more generalist and run projects. So as far as recommendations, there was a couple different routes that you can take, as you mentioned. You can specialize, and in some cases you need to go to a bigger market. And there you need to really hone your skills and learn everything you can about editing or lighting, the audio. Because when you're at that level, they want the best of the best. And if you want to become more of a multi-skilled, you're not an expert at everything. Like, I'm not an expert at anything, honestly. But I think I know a fair amount across the board, which for me has helped me stay in the area. I'm from Green Bay. I like Madison. Stayed, within this area with my general knowledge. That's worked for me.
All right, so let's start moving on to questions. We have our first one already lined up.
Hi, my question is for Keith. Keith, you're talking about advertising and social media. What have you found that is the most effective way to advertise on social media, and how do you interact with the consumers online?
Well, content. It's content. It's got to be good content, and it's got to be relevant to who you're reaching out to. If you're reaching out to, let's say you're using LinkedIn, which we do too, and you want to reach small business, you have to create content that is important to them, things that they're going to want to spend time reading. So it could be tips about your, running your small business. It could be tips about taxes, things like that. And if you send that content out to small business, it's more relative to them, and that'll lead to engagement. They might have some more questions, like, you said something about this particular item. Can you tell me more? And then that'll start a conversation. We also do a lot of content about people's dreams. So our content is about getting people to think about what they want to do in life and what's important to them. And we tell stories. We cover people that are in small business or have a bakery or what have you. We do storytelling. So we don't focus that particular set of content towards small business, although it could resonate with them too. But think about who you're sending it out to, who's your audience, and design your content around that.
Hi, my question's for all of you. When you guys graduated, did you know what field of media exactly you wanted to go into, or did you kind of just go with the flow and figure it out as you went?
I personally was not quite sure where I wanted to end up, but I knew I was headed towards I wanted to head towards like a management role, so like working at a station, and then I really found out that I wanted to be in a nonprofit and a people-serving organization, so then it shifted to me figuring out how media could work there.
I don't know, give it a shot.
Sure.
Give me a few minutes to think about that.
For me, definitely, I knew I wanted to go into radio. I had that TV background a little bit too, just in case I couldn't find something in radio, because as I mentioned, it is hard to find a starting job in radio at sometimes. But definitely radio was where I knew I wanted to be.
I did go with the flow because you really don't know. I knew I wanted to go back to my hometown and actually get into a TV station, but as far as what I would do, even if it was on the creative side or news side or whatever, whatever came up, I would try to tackle that and see if I could do a good job with it and go from there. So I think set plans, there's a lot to be said about set plans too, and lining up the tactics behind those plans and do this step, next step. There's a lot to be said about that, but I've just kind of flowed in a way, I'd say.
Okay, thanks.
Go ahead.
My question that I have is really for all of you. It's just with some of your career paths, what you're doing right now, like the Girl Scouts and all that, do you work with organizations too, other than your own or with your own outside of the state then too? And how often do you do that, or how is that maybe different than just locally, if you're with local compared to out of state?
Yeah, Girl Scouting is, so there are about 100 councils throughout the country. And we have what I affectionately refer to as like the mothership, Girl Scouts of the USA, which is GSUSA, and they kind of set the tone. So like if you go and buy a badge book to like a Girl Scout Junior, a Girl's Guide to Girl Scouting, that's really set by Girl Scouts of the USA, excuse me. And so we sort of facilitate, they send us stuff all the time. They have all kinds of like media kits, but we really pick the direction of our local council. There are other councils in the state of Wisconsin, so if you grew up in the Milwaukee area, there's GSYs, then there's Badgerland and Manitou, and we do work with them. Our office is on a beautiful nature preserve, so they all get together and meet there, and we talk about different ways that we can work together. Girl Scouting as a whole really works together. I don't know how that is for you.
We actually have a community investment area, so our company volunteers a lot of our employees across the 19 states that we operate. We do a lot of volunteering in one way or another. And we also provide, in some cases, financial support to some organizations, like United Way. But there's quite a few different ones that we get involved with. That's more of a communications, public relations function versus marketing, at least where I work. But we do as a company and as individual employees, we're involved with a lot of outside organizations.
And yeah, with my station, we're actually part of a larger company. We're owned by Scripps, which is one of the largest media ones in the nation. Yeah. So we can occasionally work with other stations within that media group to get audio and stories. If there's a story that breaks out east, we certainly get story or audio from other stations. We can also share with. We have some other stations in the state that we share stories with too.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we are all out of time. I'd like to thank the talented members of the panel, Melissa, Keith, Sarah. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and helping us with our career paths into the media industry. I'd also like to thank the RTF professors and students who are contributing to the production of this year's Pro Perspectives panel. And finally, thank you for joining us live on 90.3 WRST FM Oshkosh and Titan TV channel 97-57. I'm Reegan Wallander, and this has been the 7th annual Radio TV Film Pro Perspectives panel at UW Oshkosh. We'll see you again next year.